Live look at Jerusalem right now. Breaking news. These are mass protests happening across Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu just announced a pause to his controversial plan to overhaul the country's court system. Let's get out to the ground. Daniel Cohen is there among the protesters with the very latest. Netanyahu speaking a short time ago, we believe. What did he say, Daniel?
Right. Yeah, that's right. Hi, Bianca, and hello, everyone, from the heart of Tel Aviv and the largest protest by far in this area. Prime Minister Netanyahu speaking literally just moments ago, trying to extend an olive branch to people on the right and the left to bring calm and peace to the streets of Israel. Netanyahu speaking in Hebrew, so I'll just translate for you what he said. He acknowledged the demonstrators and he agreed to pause the legislation. That is the big news of the day. But he also said that tens of thousands of people on his side support the majority and support the coalition. So don't mistake a suspension today for a full stop of this proposed legislation. Earlier today, a sea of Israelis took to the streets. On Sunday, thousands of protesters blocked the main highway through Tel Aviv, just a few feet from where I'm standing right now, after Netanyahu fired the defense minister for opposing his plan. Today, the country came to a grinding halt after Israel's largest union stopped flights at Ben Gurion Airport and shipping in Haifa, that's Israel's largest port. Netanyahu and his supporters believe the reforms here. So what is this all about, you may be asking? Strengthen democracy by giving democratically elected Knesset members power to override the Supreme Court, which has unchecked power to veto any legislation it wants. For weeks, the left in Israel has created chaos, calling the Bibi-led overhaul itself a threat to democracy. Tonight, anti-government demonstrators are feeling emboldened. You can hear the celebration going on behind me by their, what is a temporary victory, at least for now. Conservatives and those who supported Bibi's re-election are having to watch this battle resume after Passover. It's been mostly the left in the streets until tonight. Coalition leaders are calling for a conservative protest outside the Knesset in Jerusalem that started just minutes ago. So we'll see how the rest of this evening unfolds. Bianca?
Daniel Cohen, live among that large group of protesters with the up-to-the-minute information. Daniel, we appreciate it. We know it's later there. Thank you for that update on the breaking news in Israel.
All right, for more on this, let's welcome in Morton Klein. He is the national president for the Zionist Organization for America, the oldest pro-Israel group here in the United States. Morton, great to have you with us.
Thanks for being with us.
Great to be with a station that more than any other tells the whole truth about the issues.
Thank you.
I'm honored to be here.
Thank you for saying that. Give us your thoughts on what's happening now in Israel.
The Supreme Court actions itself is what caused this government in Israel to move to make changes. This has been going on for years, discussions about this. Because right now, they choose judges for the Supreme Court by having judges in the Supreme Court and some other people who agree with the left-wing judges to decide who's in the Supreme Court. So that means conservatives can almost never get on the Supreme Court. Virtually every member of the 15-member Supreme Court is on the left politically. And they want to change that, saying we want more balance where you have conservative people as well intertwined, because right now it's impossible. The Supreme Court justices right now have veto power over any selection, and they want that changed. That's totally not only legitimate, it's necessary. And the second major issue is the override. A move to have the Knesset be able to override rulings of the Supreme Court. Why did they want to do this? Not because they just want power and they want to eliminate the Supreme Court. It's because dozens and dozens of times the Israeli Supreme Court overrules black and white Israeli law. They ignore the law completely, saying it's not reasonable. They have this theory, reasonableness. If the Supreme Court think it's not reasonable, we will ignore it. Just one example. There's an Israeli law that Israel will not permit an activist in the BDS movement, people who want to boycott Israel, sanction Israel, to come in the country. It's Israeli law, whether one likes the law or not. And when Ilan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, two very activist anti-Israel boycott people, wanted to come into Israel, and they stopped them. Certain people went to the Supreme Court arguing that they should be let in, even though the law says they're not allowed. The Supreme Court said, this law is not reasonable. We're going to let them in. And this happens dozens of times. So the reason there's a move to override the Supreme Court is because the Supreme Court regularly overrides the Knesset.
These protests are widespread. Were bubbling up last week more, as you see. There are huge pictures today of what happened. Banks were closed. People, flocking the streets here. Yesterday, the White House, administration released a statement saying they're deeply concerned, called on a need for compromise. As you just heard General Cohen saying, Netanyahu said, I'll acknowledge the demonstrators, but this overhaul is necessary. So it sounds like, he's put a pause in it. What do you make of his kind of move to do this, at least to kind of maybe calm the nerves of people out there today? But it is going to come up again.
They're going to revisit the issue this summer. I think they never should have stopped it. Why? You cannot allow mobs and violence and closing off major highways to determine the actions of a government. If you allow that to determine it, you're going to get more mobs and violence and blocking of major highways. So I think this was a mistake. And in fact, this government pleaded with the left, Yair Lapid and others on the left who oppose this legislation, saying, let's sit down, we're ready to compromise, let's sit down and speak. They have refused to sit down because they don't want to compromise. They don't want this reform in any way, shape, or form. And why don't they? Because right now the country has moved to the right politically. Left-wing governments looks like it cannot happen in the near future. And their only power the left in Israel now has is the Supreme Court, who overrules the legislation of the Knesset. And that's why they're going out of their minds, because they think all their power will be gone. So I hope and pray that in the summer at least they can revisit it and have a legitimate compromise, because reform is necessary and appropriate to make these changes. And for the U.S. to criticize this, by the way, is so wrong. This is an internal domestic Israeli matter. Did Netanyahu or Israel condemn those here in America, where I live, when they wanted to increase the Supreme Court from 9 to 13? That would have been wrong for Israel to say anything. Right. It's wrong for America to say anything about an internal matter. It's for the Israelis to decide.
Morton Klein, great to see you, President of the Zionist Organization of America. We appreciate your insights, as always.
Thank you so much. Good to have you in.